I was like moved to tears, but only towards the end of it, which is frankly too late.
Okay. I absolutely loved it. I was scouring through the entire screenplay trying to find something that I can rave about in the review, and I just couldn't. A lot of his tales for me have personally like impacted me so much that, you know, I want to like shake him and tell him, look, we love your film.
What amazes me most about Fahadh, Anmol, is that he's not. Hey everyone, I'm Anupama Chopra and this is The Late Take.
And we're here to discuss many titles.
Too many titles.
Yes, so where do we start with?
Listen, let's start with the one I didn't see because I was traveling. I got on a plane that evening, Bade Miyan Chote Miyan, which is all yours.
You missed out, definitely. I was thinking, wow, okay, this is going to be, there are times where you step inside a theater with no expectations, okay? So I sometimes wonder whether we give credit to films when we go with that sense of psychologically being prepared to be even slightly impressed. So does
the bar
that,
is low.
The bar is low, so does that lead to you giving, say, a movie that even marginally impresses you a lot of credit?
Yeah.
When it doesn't pass that litmus test, I think there's something really to worry about. And I was scouring through the entire screenplay trying to find something that I can rave about in the review, and I just couldn't.
Which is a shame given, I mean, listen, I like Ali Abbas Zafar. I've enjoyed so many of his films. You know, he does masala well.
No, you look at Tiger Zinda Hai,
Yeah.
I found it extremely entertaining. You look at Sultan, I find it...
I was also interested in Bloody Daddy. I had a good time.
Okay, so like I'm not a big fan of Bloody Daddy because if I'm looking for unapologetic action, it somehow didn't deliver that for me. And as like I'm a huge Shahid Kapoor fan, so I wanted to see him do a John Wick, which
Correct.
I
Which he
felt
didn't
was sort of a...
Fair enough. But more or less, he's a fun director.
A fun director.
Yeah.
I couldn't see a stamp of Ali Abbas Zafar in this film at all. I felt like the action sequences were incoherent. You know, in the pursuit of showcasing real locations and a scale, it almost made me think that they've invested in set pieces versus a movie with a vision.
Yeah.
And I was blown away by the fact that a dynamic which could have been an extension of the original movie, which is a sort
Mr.
of
Bachchan
mentor
and Govinda,
student and banter amongst the main leads. I found that Tiger was given more of dynamic dialogues and having more fun, and Akshay Kumar, who is known for his comic timing, and he was given such stale dialogues. It almost seemed like a crime to me that Tiger's the one having more fun and Akshay is almost like just on autopilot.
What a shame.
And
massive money.
Massive money.
Yeah.
And you know what's crazy is that I mean, from what was presented on paper was these real locations and it's going to be a treat visually. All the action set pieces are in designed sets. So even when you go to Shanghai and London, it seems like it's been done on a stage set in Bandra. Yeah. So it was, and I think the biggest crime was how Prithvi Raj was designed. An antagonist, if you've ever seen Kurti,
of course,
he
he's
is
stunning,
intimidating, he is scary. I got tired of his pralay dialogues so much where I didn't have even like an iota of fear of him as an antagonist. He had a weak origin story. I got exhausted by the end of it.
Shame.
The women, what are they doing in that movie? I have no idea. Sonakshi Sinha, Alaya is playing some nerd who's helping them out, and she's mostly gawking at Tiger throughout the film. It makes no sense.
What a shame. This could have been so much fun.
I'm telling you, there is... it deserves the criticism because it's a shame that this big Eid release is happening and we get that kind of a product.
Yeah.
And I feel like it being called out for its lack of quality, it's justified. Everybody should talk about that. There is no effort in the screenplay and the script, and that should have been paramount versus anything else.
For me, honestly, I felt like Maidaan didn't have that problem. I felt like people obviously put in a lot of effort. So it wasn't for lack of trying. And yet I thought that film didn't come together till too late in the narrative. For me, that first half was just very disjointed, extremely, and truthfully, I'm not a fan of football. I'm not a fan of any sport. So when I see a sports film, it has to be the narrative around the sport, and the whole the sport is just there as a metaphor, right? It's what happens around it that really interests me. And so the matches, which were shot with great skill and very immersive, and all of that, but after a while it just became eye glazing. It was just, by the time they got to that second half, when you discover that he has cancer, and then you're playing for broke, and of course it's very, very high drama, but by the end of it, it was for me very rousing, and I was like moved to tears, but only towards the end of it, which is frankly too late.
Okay. I absolutely loved it.
You loved it. It worked for you through.
I loved Maidaan, and I'll tell you, I've been a football fan ever since I was a kid. So for me, to see that kind of authenticity with its gameplay, I mean, you have to see, like, our references are Dhandanadan Goal and Bigil, which are a travesty in my opinion in terms of presenting the game itself.
Sure.
So when I looked at that authenticity during gameplay, I was like, whoa, they've really put in an effort in terms of at least how the players are dealing with it. The time in which it is set for me was so interesting. Just after independence, Indians still dealing with it almost being a favor for them participating in these international events. And I thought Ajay Devgan was so good.
He was good.
For me, the biggest stumbling block was Gajraj Rao's character.
I was just going to come to that.
Exhausting.
The villains were so sloppy. Both Gajraj Rao and the sidekick, Indranil,
who gorging on samosas and are incompetent. It's at one point of time, those board meetings itself were like, what you're discussing everything other than football, and I understand. It's almost the reason why India still struggles, in the particular sport. But that was always for me like, what is he even doing? Giving so much power to a journalist who's connected. It seemed like
he can make or break governments. I wish some of us had that power.
Imagine, and then Ajay going to the Prime Minister then, and then, that seemed the only stumbling block for me. For me, the game was too beautiful, ma'am. Like, it was shot so beautifully. I fell in love with that, as you said, the last 40 minutes. I did get emotional. And I was in a theatre that was genuinely reacting to the game like it was a live game. So
then maybe it's me, just because I don't get any sport.
But see, for you, the emotional arc needs to work of how it came together. Like, I'll tell you, for me, that was slightly tough to connect with. Was I did not understand how the Indian team at that point of time in that part of history worked as a football team. For me, I don't know what Ajay Devgan integrated into that team for it to be a cohesive structure.
Right.
So I was like, I would have loved if I knew technically how that team worked together. But
it still worked.
It still worked.
Yeah.
That's me.
Yeah.
For you, it was, the journey wasn't as compelling, right?
Yeah.
And I do agree with the first half having almost a highlight structure.
Yeah.
It passed by years
and that
very
connective
conveniently.
tissue just wasn't there.
Yeah.
It was, even Priyamani's character was just barely there. It's only once he's ill is where you get that scene where she's pushing him. But what's fascinating to me then is, Anmol, that the best film of that week then was Chamkila, which is on Netflix.
Yeah.
So you're getting quality in your home, which is a bit scary.
It is scary, and I saw, like, while I was covering through some of the comments on your review, I read a review which said that probably for Chamkila to be delivered in its unfiltered state, it had to be on a Netflix. Because it probably would have undergone severe cuts.
Yeah. Censors wouldn't have let through so much.
So maybe it's the best route that it took, for us to see it. I felt especially emotional because I recognize this Imtiaz Ali. Okay,
Yes.
for me,
Yes.
this is how he communicates something that's socially relevant as well, but is so personal also. And I like have a love-hate relationship when I see his interviews with you, because I feel like he doesn't give himself too much credit anyway, and he's almost like nonchalant about these things.
Yeah.
But
He's very zen.
Yes, and a lot of his tales for me have personally like impacted me so much that I want to like shake him and tell him, look, we love your
You've
films.
shaped generations. Yes.
And he. I felt Dijlit Dosanjh was
outstanding.
Outstanding.
Yeah.
Oh my
he
God.
He really moved me. I was crying at the end of it. And such a master stroke to cast him.
And it's so reflective of a person being cast who understands the artist and his impact. Yeah. And it leads to such an authentic portrayal, right?
Bilkul.
And I felt even Parineeti was great. I felt it was so interesting for the story of Chamkila to be told from the character of Tikki, who had such conflicting feelings about him, and on the surface who wanted to portray that he hated him, but in the process of telling the story, you feel
his love,
love for him.
And
I remember seeing your interview with Karan Aujla, and just how relevant the Punjabi artists and their position in society still is so marred with violence and conflict.
It's the same story.
It's
still playing that
40 years ago and today.
Which is why for me also Anmol, what he did formally, what he did in terms of you break the fourth wall, you've got all the split screens and the back and forth, and I just felt like he really let loose as an artist. Imtiaz really just said, I'm going to do this as I want to do it, and maybe that's the protection that Netflix offers. That you can do what you want to do and speak your truth in a very direct way without worrying about Friday ko kaun aayega.
Yeah. And I think we spoke about this during Gehraiyan also. It dilutes the analysis that you do for films based on its performance at the box office.
Yeah.
It almost doesn't lead to more discourse about the film structure and what it wanted to say. And I felt like the music, especially that scene where that elder lady is speaking about like, we have always sung these kind of songs, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
And it leads to a generation of different women talking about something that is so taboo, but it's been a part of our society all around us.
It has. Anmol, I remember as a young child, being shooed out of the room because they were singing songs like this at some cousin's wedding, and I'm from UP, so this is it's always been there, and it's just, I think the way he portrayed it and the many things he talked about, and the idea of finally who's the last mile? Is it the artist, or is it the audience that makes the artist and will only listen to a certain kind of song? I loved it. I thought it was just fantastic.
For me also, regarding censorship, who decides?
Who decides?
And an artist being almost a slave to the audience, that was so compelling. And it made me introspect about us as people who review films when he is being interviewed by that journalist, like our perception of artists based on what they create, and how we almost create an umbrella of that being their personality. And
that moment, even though I felt like that journalist felt like she was from today, like she was a woke journalist questioning him. But what he said, that sabki औकात नहीं होती है सच और गलत सोचने की, was just that hit really hard. Because again, maybe it is you come from a place of privilege when 100%. You can consider those things of morality and what is right and what is wrong, and for him he was just like bas zinda rehna, which is just lovely. So I'm 3 cheers to Netflix and 100. To Imtiaz Ali.
And that Vida Karo conclusion, it just absolutely
it destroyed me. Me too. So, I was just sitting in front of my computer and crying.
I'm telling you, that music combination, Irshad Kamil, A.R. Rahman, Imtiaz Ali, it just works beautifully.
It's fantastic.
Yes.
Did you see the Malayalam films that also released in that week? You saw both?
So I didn't see the Vineeth Sreenivasan film. Why don't you start with that?
Okay, I'm going to say it. Varshangalkku Shesham. I love it. It's taken me like 20 days to master
You'll still
it.
be corrected in the comments, so don't worry. So yeah.
So this movie, and I saw both like 10 days post-release because I was traveling. But you know, I know it's had polarized kind of reactions, but I just felt, first of all, I'm such a sucker for films about films, right?
Yeah.
And this is of course, you know, about these two friends who go to Madras, called Madras then Chennai now, to be part of the film industry, and then their fallout and how they eventually, many years later, come together and finally work together. One is a music director and a composer, and the other is a director and a writer. And at the end of it, and you know, it's too long, it's just overstuffed, which I think is Hridayam, directed by Vineeth Sreenivasan, also had that same problem, just too much going on. Here to, matlab, it's too much of another level much, because there's like, कितने साल बीत जाते हैं, and friends का ये होता है, love interest भी आ जाते हैं, ये भी, you know. But by the end of it, when they finally succeed, and it's not a spoiler, we all know they'll succeed only. And it has to be, though he messes with us with that also. He pretends that maybe there's a tragic ending, but eventually it's not. I just wept.
Oh damn. Okay.
When you know, and it's so funny because now I go out, I go to Kurla to watch Malayalam cinema, and I'm sitting there by myself because that's just the way it is.
Yeah.
And I'm just sitting there crying because these two men have finally had a box office success.
Yeah.
I thought it was very moving. And he's, I think, such a, you know, he has the wit. Parts of it are very funny. He has the warmth to kind of pull it together.
Okay.
So I would suggest you see it, despite all the polarizing stuff.
Yes.
But then, of course, there's Fafa in Aavesham.
The best theatre experience I've had this year.
I
best.
cannot tell you.
I can't tell you, ma'am. I spoke about this in the review also. I was in Noida. Okay. Packed theatre.
I love it.
And the way the audience was reacting to that screen, I mean, I couldn't help myself but like shout and scream and clap. What a wild ride. Sushin Shyam with his music, Fafa as Ranga, and his right-hand man, I think his name is Sajan Gopu.
Yes,
He plays Amban.
Amban is just, he needs his own spin-off.
For me, they, unpopular opinion, like give competition to Munna and Circuit.
Absolutely.
They are
and why not?
so hilarious.
Munna and Circuit.
Fully, yes.
Though for me that's a Sholay reference, but everybody else thinks it's Munna and Circuit. But completely.
It was mad. And you know, I loved that unhinged, uninhibited sort of treatment of the film, and especially Fahadh's character. I can't tell you, you know, I was just thinking how interesting of a concept of, you would assume college kids going to bars would be to pick up women or like, and they're picking up gangsters. And that concept in itself, I remember his entry happens in a urinal.
Yeah.
And
people were clapping in my
audience
theatre
to
as well.
erupt like that, it was...
But what an entry!
What an entry.
It was amazing.
His look, his body language, his reels, everything.
Anmol, in Vineeth's film, there's Niven Pauly playing this crazy actor who taps into that same manic energy. But in this film, it's like, I think that's what Jeetu Madhavan does. I think Romancham is also that same delirious world, completely populated by men. I mean, the women are nowhere to be found.
Absent,
nowhere to be found. But it's colorful, it's gaudy, it's crazy in just the right sort of way, and it's so funny.
You know, I loved how much he delayed the aura of Ranga. Because you are with the boys of almost being doubtful of his capability, especially after the first brawl where he's just playing spectator. So it's like he seems like a poser. He might not be the real gangster.
But there's a reason why he doesn't hit.
But you know, those kind of concepts in itself on paper might seem so ludicrous.
Correct.
But the conviction is so on point.
It's the the telling of the tale, because the tale itself is very thin.
Yeah.
इतना कुछ नहीं हो रहा उसमें. In fact, he could have taken some of Vineeth's plot. इस फिल्म में इतना plot था, उस फिल्म में डाल सकते थे.
Because I think the real plot point I couldn't care less about, with that Mansoor Ali Khan warring gang.
Yeah.
That was so immaterial for me.
Yeah.
But for me, that interval block of him beating up those students and then switching to Kannada and then Hindi, just so that people get the point.
And then they're like, don't speak in Hindi, it's okay.
It's okay.
I have died laughing.
No.
See, that humor, Anmol, is so hard to do.
So hard.
Because it's not a on paper humor again. It's so much of what you are actually doing in that moment. I wonder how much of it is improvised and how much is on paper. But for me, the three boys, the actors were also amazing. Amban was amazing. And of course, what amazes me most about Fahadh, Anmol, is that he's not bringing that level of screen presence with physicality. He's a skinny man. When he does the towel dance, I have died.
The reels he's posting, but I couldn't help but even get emotional in Aavesham with the paper thin
yes.
focus
because
of it
not
also.
Just a caricature.
Yeah. So for him, for his entire stance of looking at the wall actually being him breaking down, I thought that was such a brilliant touch across decades that he's been left by his loved ones.
Yeah.
It was so beautifully done.
And he says he doesn't have enough likes on Instagram.
Oh my God. So good. So good.
Cannot recommend it enough.
Yes.
I think, I don't know. This is what I always say to all Malayalam artists I meet, like, what are you guys smoking, man?
Damn.
Because they are on a roll.
Yeah.
And this year
especially.
is insane.
Yeah.
It's completely crazy. And conversely, Hindi cinema is just going through, and not, I think, again, for just bad quality, though there is that as well. But I think like a film like Aur Do Pyaar, which I enjoyed. I thought they were trying to do something new. They were trying to do something different. Vidya and Pratik are so lovely. I don't know. What was your sense of it?
I personally loved it.
It was so much. It was just nice and non-judgmental and fun.
And both of them were so good.
So good.
Even with their particular affairs, them reconnecting out of all things because of a funeral, it was such a odd but interesting concoction, but so realistic as well of sort of modern day monogamous relationships and when boredom or apathy does set in. I found both of them to be so convincing. I found the conclusion of it all to be so realistic. I wonder why there aren't any takers for it, for such cinema, so much so that on the first day only they are compelled to do a buy one get one free offer with tickets.
It's such a bummer.
It is a bummer, but the last 2 weeks for Hindi cinema, at least in the theatres, have not been that exciting at all.
Yeah, and I think I can see where the problem is with a film like LSD2, which is genuinely, I am Dibakar's great admirer. I think his even when his films don't work, there are things in them that are really compelling, like there are in this film, But as a whole, it's a very tough one.
Very tough one.
Yeah.
And I think the biggest struggle that I had with this film was, it speaks a particular language that someone well versed with internet culture will immediately get. It's almost edited to a point where it communicates to an audience which is desensitized to a saturation of stimulus, of consistent editing patterns and sound effects. So you see it edited like a Gen Z would. Right? And still I found it almost getting indulgent with that same language that it wanted to communicate with.
Yeah.
And I understand the intention behind the metaverse and everything coming in with that gamer.
Yeah.
But I think it lacked the cohesive structure of what he did so well with part one. Yeah. Of 3 perspectives, all shot in different camera techniques, and then somehow it all being intertwined.
Yeah.
Whereas I felt like he moved on after certain themes were explored, and then he moved on to another character in this one. I could only take so much of the
it got exhausting.
editing laughter and the ugliness of each frame.
It was very ugly.
Yeah.
It was, and he's a tough artist. He's not there to make you comfortable at all, and which is why we admire him. But I think this just became exhausting.
It did, and it's I think 1 hour, less than 2 hours in its running time, and I think there's a reason why reels are restricted to 1 minute of how the editing patterns can get exhausting.
Correct. You can't take it beyond
and
a point.
I do acknowledge what he was trying to do with he presented the Ryan International School case. There was even a parody on the Arushi case and the press conference held. So I could see patterns of what he was trying to do, but as a whole, it just
doesn't
was as you said, slightly tiring.
And it's the writers Pratik Vats and Shubham who did Ibalehu are the writers for this film. So I was hoping for something more magical, but in Dibakar we trust. And I have to tell you, there is Pratik Vats in fact has done a film. Mami has just done this thing called Mami Select, filmed on iPhone, and Pratik Vats has directed one of those films, and it's just superb.
Okay.
Please check it out, everyone, on YouTube. It is fantastic. So he's a really, really fine maker. I think this was just them having an off day.
Probably. Yeah.
What are you looking forward to?
So I think we're looking forward to Rajkumar's movie Shrikant. I hopefully it does get a lot of love because I can see I love him as an actor.
He's
I can
fantastic,
see him investing personally and professionally to these roles and characters. So I do hope that it shapes up like a really inspiring tale. Other than that, I'm looking at Kalki updates mostly.
How exciting
to see Amitabh Bachchan as Ashwathama.
Yeah.
And they've integrated a AI version of a young Amitabh in it also.
Yeah.
A span of 6,000 years, a screenplay. It's a risky project, but I'm going to be there.
Hey, play for broke, right?
100%. 100%.
And I'm looking forward to Hira Mandi.
Hira Mandi, oh yes. That's
SLB back.
Yeah.
With all the scale, all the opulence, all those beautiful women. Cannot wait.
What actors? Like there's Fardeen Khan.
It's exciting. It's exciting.
And with that, I think let's look at some of the comments we've got. So this is Ram McKee 6319. He says, I'm still waiting for a proper buddy cop action comedy in the Indian cinema. Something like Bad Boys, Lethal Weapon, Nice Guys, etc. Such an enjoyable and entertaining genre and used to be a show-shot moneymaker in Hollywood. I hope someone tries to bring something different to the genre in Bollywood in the future. That's the potential that I was constantly craving for in this dynamic.
But he's absolutely right.
100%.
This is such a fun genre, and Hollywood has done it to death, but it can be done over and over. And
you saw it in the 90s with the Saif Akshay combo.
Yes.
So there was so much you could have done.
Such fun.
In one of the action set pieces, there's a snippet of Amitabh Bachchan and Govinda from Bade Miyan Chote Miyan. So they're doing the action while the terrorists are watching Bade Miyan Chote Miyan. So I was like, yahi bana dete. Anyway, okay.
Okay, Maninder says, I would like to say that Chamkila's songs did portray the male gaze, but with him was also Amar Jyot who portrayed female gaze too. Love the review. Oh, thank you. I think so. And again, I don't think we should look back from a lens of 40 years later and judge artists for what they did from today's lens. I think that as he said, he sang about what he knew about, he sang about his world, which is also what made that last scene so lovely, that the relatives are back to fighting.
Yeah.
It's like nothing changes. This was what he grew up with. This is what he's dying with. It was just so lovely. And I think that, of course, he sang about men, but that was the world he knew.
He knew, yeah.
And the fact that, Amar Jyot was there, Amar Jyot was singing, she was an equal participant, I thought was fabulous.
Yes, 100%. So this is Arush Manot. He says, there was such a fatigue of biopic or movies inspired by true events, but this movie was such a breath of fresh air. I personally am not a big football fan, but the way they showed the matches was brilliant and made me on the edge of my seat. It deserves far better than its competitor movie. For me, see, that was such a shocking aspect for me on just the authenticity of the gameplay. So I was very invested in the football of it all. So I did personally have a lovely experience watching Maidaan. I do understand that it was slightly exhausting in the first half or so, but it more than made it up for me with the game.
You know, I think Anmol, it'll find its audience on OTT.
Oh, 100. But I hate this. I hate
know.
this, you know.
I know.
Now what's happened is...
It's also constructed as a big screen film.
Yeah, and I think what's happened now is that the blockbusters get trashed on OTT, and those that are not getting the box office love, then they're like, where was the audience for this?
Exactly.
Anyway.
Exactly. Anurag Kashyap had told me this, you know, at Mami, when Kennedy showed, we had a mini riot, okay, because people were there were hundreds of people lined up, and he's like, "Ye log kahan hote hain? Jab meri film release hoti hai."
This reminded me of your talk with Ranbir before Sanju, and everyone was getting up. He's like, "Tamasha changed my life. Tamasha changed like." Bhai, he's like, "Tum kahan the, bhai?" Jab release hui thi.
Exactly. Radiant 2795 says, "Man, Aavesham is such a laugh riot. Especially Ranga and his whole gang are such a vibe, and Ranga's reels are epic. The whole interval holy fight best. Couldn't agree more."
Yeah, I still say that the most entertaining experience I've had in the theatre.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
more of that from Malayalam cinema this year, hopefully.
I don't know. I want more of Ranga. Yeah.
Oh, yes,
And do a sequel quickly.
100%. He needs his own titled film. Yeah.
In and as Ranga.
In and as Ranga, yes.
Well, that's it then, Anmol. That was a lot of movies, and we
See you
will...
next year. I mean,
No. Hey, we were good. We
We
came
were very
back
good.
quicker.
Yes.
And we will do the same.
100%.
Thank you for watching.